to another episode of RPMbassy. I mentioned a few months ago in the singles list that we did about Deftones and how they're one of my favourite bands, and I wanted to do essentially a comprehensive worst to best list of all of their songs, at least album songs, and basically just go through and do a full ranking. This is definitely going to be a bit controversial for some people. The opinion I have on some songs I know is definitely not the norm compared to what some other people think of them. But with that said, listen to the list, see what you think, and comment down below if you've got any differing opinions. You likely will, and let's just have a bit of fun with it. My very worst song, which on my list is 101 out of the list that I've curated, is from the album Gore, and it's the song Pictura Infamante. This is one of the few Deftones songs that I actively dislike. This sort of first section is pretty much going to be like the quote-unquote bad songs, but the first section is only a few tracks long. So yeah, Pictura Infamante, the whole song sounds off. Like, there's no real, like, catchiness to it. I really dislike the intro, that, like, the whole thing is very odd, and I don't mind it when songs have stuff that's slightly off-kilter, but then it builds up and you get the sort of the resolution and the release to kind of break that tension. But this song never gives that. Like, the whole, even the verses and then the chorus, it's all just very off. And for me, it's, as I say, my least favourite by a long margin, and one of the few Deftones songs that I will actively choose to not listen to when I'm listening through their albums. Next up, number 100 is Ceremony, which is from the latest album Ohms. Now, this was actually released as a single, which really surprised me because this really doesn't vibe with me. I can't get on with how this song sounds. I think the intro, especially, the sort of very weird, like, dun 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 dun, that, it's sort of almost like Meshuggah but not plugged into an amp kind of feel to it. There's slightly off timing and things. I feel like, again, it's a song that never really gets going, and the fact that it's a single really did kind of shock me a little bit, because as that album goes, yes, it's not necessarily their best album, but Ohms has a lot better tracks on there that I think could have served as a way better choice for a single, and I don't think it really says a whole lot in the song at all. Number 99 is Geometric Headdress. There's not really a lot to say about this song. I don't care much for it. The riff itself is a little bit doesn't really do a lot for me. Some of these songs I'm just going to be pretty much giving you the song title and moving on, and this is one of them. Number 98, This Link Is Dead. This is from Ohms again. The intro is quite cool. I really like that weird ambient intro, and I think like Frank's sort of keyboard and synthesizer stuff is what really brings the album up a level. Like, some of the guitar-based stuff on the album doesn't do it a lot for me. The intro, really cool, but then I don't dislike the aggression of the song, and some of the best Deftones songs are the aggressive ones. Hexagram, like I mentioned in the singles list, is like so aggressive, but this almost feels like it's aggressive for the sake of it. It's just, let's have the most dissonant guitar leads we can, let's just make it really harsh sounding, and yeah, just falls flat for me. 97 is Xenon from Gore, and unfortunately you may have seen a pattern by now that Gore and Ohms are going to be quite heavy on the bottom half of this list. Again, cool synth intro, sounds really good. Then this weird guitar line that, in some ways I think this guitar line is worse than some of the other tracks. Who would write it like this? It sounds like a weird sort of thing that you would just make up in a jam. It doesn't sound... There's no melody to it. That wow, wow, wow. It does not do it for me at all. Okay, so 96, we're kind of out of what I would call the bad song territory now, and we're into songs that I don't dislike, they're just less good, in my opinion, than some others. This will probably be a controversial pick. Nosebleed, from the debut album Adrenaline. A really cool song, really fast and aggressive. Chino's vocals on this especially are fantastic, in my opinion, one of his best performances on that album. But again, the guitar work is very repetitive, and that's not something that we're unfamiliar with. You know, Stephen Carpenter's done fantastically well over the discography of playing very simple riffs again and again and again, but managing to make it feel like such a big production. But it's quite frantic, and it's just quite forward in terms of the riff, and it gets a little bit stale, in my opinion. Not a bad song, but far from the best. 95, Rubicon from Gore. This is a pretty cool track, actually. The riff right at the end is a really great way to end the album. I think it's a good finisher. The riff at the beginning, a little repetitive, the dun, 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 however it goes. I'm not huge on that. The chorus, I do like how the middle section of the song is quite big. You know, it's not as sort of linear as like a verse chorus verse chorus verse chorus. You know, you've got this big section in the middle which kind of leads into the end, but again, it's missing something. It's not quite upper echelon territory for me. 94, Doomed User from Gore again. The intro riff, amazing. I love that intro riff. It's so heavy, so simple, as we were saying. Like, what a great 8-string kind of riff. For me, it's the verse that ruins it. That guitar line sounds like some sort of Power Rangers intro. It's such an odd riff, and like musically, the whole song is a little bit lacking. But that intro riff actually is like almost worth the rest of the song just for that killer intro riff, and you know, when they bring it back later on in the song. 93 is Radiant City. Again, another one with a weird riff that I don't really mesh very well with. It's a cool bass line, and I know it's definitely kind of like a Sergio kind of song. It's got that sort of hardcore kind of vibe to it, but nothing really happens in the song, in my opinion, and again, it just falls flat. 92, Phantom Bride from Gore. Cool intro, okay kind of verse-chorus structure. The thing that really kind of picks this song up is that Jerry Cantrell, that solo that he does, and the outro, that really heavy outro, dun 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 dun, that's like so fucking cool, and I wish that the song had more of that sort of thing. But that quiet intro I do like. Verse chorus is okay, outro fantastic. Number 91, Gore, the title track from the album Gore. Weird intro, but pretty cool overall. The main thing that for me is that heavy 8-string riff again, the dun 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 dun. That's cool. Would have liked to have just seen the song kind of be more of that. You know, I think that for me is kind of one of the things I dislike about Gore, is that you've got all of these songs with really cool elements, but then you've got songs that could have just been very sort of laid back and ambient feeling, and then you put large riffs in there, and I feel like some of the songs could have been better off just focusing on really heavy big riffs, or really sort of down-tempo, relaxed, ambient guitar-based stuff. But every single song kind of has this like half and half feel to it, and I think that's what lets the album down quite a bit. Number 90 is Headless from Ohms. Yes, it's a low number, but actually this is a pretty solid song, and as I said, like, we're past the bad section already. This is all decent stuff. This song, actually, really cool intro. I love that kind of weird glitchy sound with the like feedback and everything, and some of the riffs, especially towards the end of the track, really, really cool. This is one I think that you have to listen to a few times to get, and that I think is just kind of a theme with their later albums in general. You kind of have to give them more than one listen to sort of fully appreciate what they're doing with the albums. Like I said, not necessarily the best thing they've ever done, but a solid song nonetheless. Number 89 is Lifter. This, I think, is one of the songs that I would show people when I wanted them to at least get an idea of where Deftones started. This to me is the sound of Adrenaline. Not necessarily the best song on Adrenaline, as you will have guessed, because it's not the last one I've mentioned. But it's kind of so characteristic of what that album sounds like. It's got that sort of high Chino vocal with the weird sort of like full open string kind of playing that Steph was doing at the time, where he's just, you know, smashing all the open strings to like make everything sound huge. And I think this is one of the most characteristic Deftones tracks. Not necessarily the best, obviously, but definitely one that kind of highlights their early sound. And I also like the fact that the very beginning of the song, you've got that little kick snare, which obviously they would then use in My Own Summer as well, which maybe it was a callback, maybe it just happened, I don't know. I like to think of it as a callback. 88 is Fire Real, again from Adrenaline. This kind of feels like a bit of an emo kind of track. I think Chino's performance kind of gives me Weezer kind of vibes. Maybe I'm entirely off base with that, but it feels like he's kind of doing a Rivers Cuomo kind of impression almost. Really amazing guitar intro, that moody sort of chord pattern, love that. The main riffs and chorus and stuff, they're okay. The vocals kind of really push the chorus, and the intro is really the guitar driven part. It would have been nicer if the two of them were sort of more in sync across the whole song, but you know, still decent. Number 87 is Urantia from Ohms, or Urantia. I don't know how the song's properly pronounced. I'll call it Urantia. Really cool riffs. That's fucking cool. Chino's performance on this, pretty good. The riff is what carries it. Part of me thinks it should be higher, but then there are other songs on Ohms which are definitely a bigger performer than this one, so this is where it sits. 86 is Minus Blindfold from Adrenaline. This almost has like a rap-like quality to the vocal performance. Obviously there's a lot of screaming in it, but it kind of has that kind of rhythmic flow that Chino definitely did lean on a little bit in the earlier sort of years of Deftones, and it reminds me a lot of his vocal feature on Korn's cover of Wicked. That kind of same sort of vocal flow. A bit weird in terms of guitar, but vocally it's really cool. I do like it. 85 is Pompeii from Ohms again. This one for me, the final synthesizer piece at the end, is what really brings this track up. The rest of the track is pretty good, not amazing but decent, but it's that waiting and that payoff for that last synthesizer piece which really sells it for me. The whole track is made worth it just by that part alone, in my opinion. 84 is Fist, again from Adrenaline. I feel like I'm kind of going back and forth on these. I know that it's quite a lot at the beginning, but I promise I do like the album. It's just obviously we've got some big things still to come in the list. This feels quite similar to the song God Hand, or God's Hand, the demo track that they released a few years before. Part of me wonders whether or not it's meant to relate back to it. The vocals to it, and especially the end where it kind of has this soaring feeling to it. It reminds me a lot of that track, and part of me thinks perhaps they are, perhaps this is a spiritual successor to God's Hand. 83 is Damone, which is technically a hidden track on the album Around the Fur. Solid track still, but definitely the weakest of that album. I think that's one of the most solid albums they've done. I mean, it makes sense for it to be the hidden track. It's probably the one with the sort of least attention to production, it feels. It does have a bit of a demo-ish quality to it. Solid riff, really cool sound, that kind of like suspended chord that Steph was doing a lot at the time. Very, very good song all in all, but a bit repetitive, and the verse is only okay. 82 is 1 Week from Adrenaline again. This one for me, cool like bass intro, but the verses are a little bit lacking. What really saves it for me is the chorus, that really cool chorus, and that sound that he has across the whole album. Stephen Carpenter's like sort of barred power chords and stuff, really like cool sound all in all on that chorus, but the rest of the song not so stellar. 81 is Leathers, so this is the first on the list from the album Koi no Yokan. Pretty cool song all in all. I feel like the intro takes a bit of time to get going. Would have made sense for a first track on the album, in my opinion, to kind of bring everything up to pace. But in the middle of the album, it kind of, I suppose you could say it serves as a palate cleanser, but it sort of messes with the flow a little bit for me. The bridge sort of guitar line, really, really cool. The guitar on most of the track is excellent. The vocals are pretty good. There's some notes which feel a bit pitchy. Obviously, it's all intentional, but the sort of melody of it doesn't quite fit for me. Number 80 is What Happened to You, again from Koi no Yokan. A bit of a weird song to have as an outro track on the album. Again, the flow of the album is sort of, obviously you're interrupting the flow by it being the end of the album anyway, but this is a weird one to end on. It almost feels like a second part to Saturday Night Wrist's Up Up Down Down, like the sound of it and that kind of spacey, echoey kind of vibe to it. It would have, this, I think, if you were having a palate cleanser on the album, this would have fit much better in somewhere in the middle if you needed that sort of palate cleanser, that ambient break. But it is a cool song. 79 is Goon Squad from Koi no Yokan again. Very cool intro, that kind of like slow build up and then that massively heavy riff. It's just such a simple song, so there's not a whole lot you can say about it, but it is very cool. And when they kind of like bring that riff back at the end and it feels slightly heavier, pretty cool track all in all. 78 is Error from Ohms. This, I think the title of the track is fantastic. That intro, that dissonant sound with like the sort of Floyd Rose being flicked and just what a cool name for that track, and the sound of that intro to sort of match together. Verses are okay on this one. It's the sort of soaring chorus and the end of the track which really sells it for me. It's a cool track. It's quite simple. There's not a huge amount going on, but it's pretty good. 77 is Swerve City from Koi no Yokan. Obviously, I said a minute ago, why wasn't Leathers the intro track? To be fair, this is a great intro track. That just like straight in, no messing about, that really cool riff, and the end of the song with the sort of big soaring, screaming, reverbed out lead line. It does make sense that this is at the start, to be fair, and yeah, it's a banger. 76 is Birthmark from Adrenaline. Pretty solid song. That guitar intro is a bit meh, in my opinion, but the rest of it is solid, and the sort of vocal aggression especially is really cool. 75, Poltergeist from Koi no Yokan again. Really cool riff. That kind of like scratchy, distorted bass intro especially. This again feels like a very Sergio kind of song, the way he like approached bass playing when he joined the band. It's got that kind of vibe to it. The riff does get repeated quite a bit, but it's a cool riff. It's so simple, so straightforward, so aggressive. It works. They make it work really well. 74 is This Place Is Death. This is the first track that we've had from Diamond Eyes. I remember when the album first came out, some people used this as their like review of the album, like this album is death. It is definitely the weakest track on the album, but it's still pretty solid, and that kind of, again, that ambient intro which we've had several times already, they do that really well, and it sort of harkens back slightly to the sound that you get towards the beginning of the song Diamond Eyes, so it's kind of like a nice way to tie the front and the end of the album together. 73 is 7 Words from Adrenaline. This is again like one of those characteristic early Deftones tracks which really sums up them as a whole when they first started. And again, you've got some of those sort of like kind of rap vocals from Chino. Yeah, the guitar line especially, that, again, a really simple kind of guitar-based intro, but yeah, it just works. Like, it's such a classic Deftones song. It really sums up their early work. Number 72 is Teenager. So yes, this is a fairly low spot for what a lot of people do consider a pretty solid Deftones song. I think for me, the reason why it isn't higher is because this kind of sound Chino would perfect when he had that first Team Sleep album. And, you know, if you compare this to, say, something like Princeton Review from the debut Team Sleep album, it kind of pales a little bit in comparison, and that's why this kind of suffers a little bit. It's one of those ones where, had I not had the reference of both of them, I think this may well have been higher, but knowing that there's more to come from this kind of sound from Chino's performances, it sort of puts this a bit more into context. 71 is MX, which is the final, like, quote-unquote official or real track from Around the Fur. This one, pretty cool, but with a very simple riff, that da-da-da-da kind of sound. I like that a lot. The one thing I'm not so keen on is that weird vocal effect that they've got, which kind of sounds like someone inhaling water. It always gives me a little bit of like, creeps me out a little bit, but yeah, decent song. Number 70 is Romantic Dreams from Koi no Yokan. Again, this is one where it could be a lot lower, but the chorus brings it up for me, especially that guitar riff with the vocals kind of like pushing it way, way up. Yeah, that part alone really makes that song for me. Number 69 is Head Up. So this is the second to last real track on Around the Fur. This features Max Cavalera, formerly of Sepultura at the time, soon to become Soulfly lead singer or frontman. The band name Soulfly actually comes from this song, a lyric in this song, which is very cool. The song itself is another one of those ones where I think if I was introducing someone to Deftones and I wanted to give them a vibe or a feel of what they can do and what kind of sounds they achieve, this is one of the songs that I would pick out. That super heavy, super simple riff with, you know, just screaming all over the place. Really, really cool. And the outro of the song is quite underappreciated, I think. Very few people I've ever seen really mention that. They just sort of mainly talk about that main riff. But the outro, very moody, and I really like that. Number 68 is The Spell of Mathematics. This is one of those ones where it's a full headbanger of a song. That riff, dun 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 dun, like, I mean, it's all over the song. That's basically all the song is, but it's so cool. It's such a heavy riff. It's such a headbanger of a riff. This is one that really stands out for me from the album Ohms. This is such a cool, interesting track. And that outro piece, I mentioned earlier that a couple of songs sounded like they should have been related to Up, Up, Down, Down. This, definitely. There are some notes in there that are almost identical in terms of the guitar part on the outro of this song. So, I would potentially say this might have a slight reference to it. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. 67 is Rocket Skates. So this was the first single, I believe, released from Diamond Eyes. And when this first came out, I was quite disappointed because it was a very different kind of sound to anything that they had done before. It was a really quite a forward kind of driven riff, and it was a lot sort of faster and not heavier than what they'd done previous, but it didn't quite sound like Deftones to begin with. But then you listen to the lyrics and yeah, actually vocally it's very much a Deftones song, and again with repeat listens, like, it's definitely grown on me, and this is a solid song. 66 is Acid Hologram from Gore. This is one that could have been lower, but there's a part that really stands out to me, and I kind of go back to the song just for it. And it's that weird sort of ambient part that's in it's like after the chorus, but kind of is the chorus, and it's those sort of dun dun wow kind of noises that Steph does, where he's like leaning on the Floyd Rose on the tremolo and kind of just absolutely going for it and making these weird noises, and you get this sort of, there's a synth part in there as well, which almost sounds like a pinball machine, and that kind of, the two of those together, it's a weird combination, but for this it really works, and I go back to the song just for that part. Number 65 is Risk. This one is one where the interplay of the synthesizers and the guitars really sell it for me. You've got essentially two riffs basically, but that kind of dreamy, slightly eerie synthesizer sound that kind of counterplays the two riffs, I think, it just gives the song so much atmosphere. And then Chino's like soaring choral vocals, I really love how all of them come together, and they make quite a different sounding track, but also quite a Deftonesy sounding track at the same time. 64 is Engine Number 9. I don't think I need to say much about this song. If you have heard of Deftones, you've probably heard this song. This is, for me, one of the best songs that is on Adrenaline, obviously because of where I put it in the list. But it's just that riff and the rappy vocals. It kind of gives you a lot of energy, and I love that about this track. 63 is Graphic Nature, another song which made it so far on the list because of a single riff, and it's that kind of chorus, post-chorus, like doom, boom, boom. Again, like the interplay with Chino's vocals and that single riff, like the weird intro aside, like I listened to the weird intro to get to that cool riff. 62, probably higher than a lot of people would have put it, and I mean technically you could say this isn't even officially like on an album because it was added later on down the line, but it's Back to School, the kind of, well, as the subtitle says, mini maggot. It's the kind of weird baby brother of Pink Maggot, which is the kind of real final track of White Pony. Yeah, I don't dislike Chino's rap vocals. I mentioned earlier like his stuff with when he did that cover with Korn and the stuff that he did on the debut album, like the way that's kind of rapped. I don't dislike it. I think the thing that kind of holds this song back, rather than it being anything musical per se, is the fact that one, we've already heard a better version of it with Pink Maggot, and two, the sort of story behind it, essentially, having Maverick Records basically tell Deftones like, yeah, you need a new metal song to put on this album so that we can sell it, which is ridiculous because obviously White Pony was like one of the most critically acclaimed albums of the new metal genre that has ever been, and kind of transcended any kind of claims of new metal, and like Deftones being associated with it. So it in some ways it's perhaps unfair to the song itself, but you kind of in the back of your head that it is a bit of a low effort song, and that they themselves weren't enjoying it, and I think part of that does rub off into how the song feels when you listen to it. 61 is Deathblow. So this is the first song on the list from the self-titled fourth album by Deftones. This song is kind of like, has a weird stonery vibe to it, and I really love that. We are very much now in the sort of section of the list where I don't have really any negative things to say about many of the tracks at all. They are all really good songs from here on out. This just happens to like be the least best of them, but yeah, it's a solid track. That huge kind of chorus riff and the heaviness of the drums, like it's a fairly basic track, but it does a lot with what it has, even though there's not that many layers, and you kind of get a hint of that ethereal, atmospheric kind of synthesizer vibe from Frank Delgado's like piano or keyboard stuff in this. That is one thing I will say just about the self-titled album in general. I wish they would have mixed those layers a little bit higher, because it's very present in stuff like Minerva, but tracks like this you can just barely hear it, and I think it would push the track up a lot if those layers were brought up in the mix so that you could kind of hear the wideness of them a little bit more. Number 60 is Rapture from Saturday Night Wrist. This is a bit of a weird one. It kind of almost sounds as if it would be on one of the later albums. It kind of has that sort of Koino Yokan or Gore kind of sounds to it in terms of the songwriting and the riffs and the way that they're built. That for me is part of the reason why it doesn't go as high as some of the other Saturday Night Wrist stuff, because it doesn't feel quite in sync with the rest of the album. It's, you know, there's really heavy songs on the album, but they have atmosphere to them, and this, like, it does have atmosphere, but I don't know, it doesn't blend quite as well as the others. Yeah, it's still a good track, and Saturday Night Wrist for me is like there's no skips on that album. Which definitely will be a controversial opinion for one of the upcoming songs. Number 59, Good Morning Beautiful from the self-titled album. This is only really 2 riffs again, but that chorus, the kind of like dissonance of the vocals, and that's something that Chino is very good at, where he doesn't actually sing the right note. And there are definitely times where it doesn't fit, like I've mentioned previously, but in this it does fit, and I think across a lot of the self-titled, those off notes are actually what really sell the tracks, and they make them far more interesting than if you just stuck exactly with what the melody should be. 58 is Needles and Pins. This, the very beginning of it, almost sounds like My Own Summer, actually. Certainly the first 2 notes, but obviously the rest of the song doesn't. As far as I'm aware, this song is performed, like, Steph is playing bass on this track, and it's just very heavily distorted. Either way, it sounds really cool, and the chorus vocals with Chi screaming in the background, yeah, it's a very effective song. Really like this one. 57 is Korea. Now this is, I'm one of those people that doesn't subscribe to the idea that heaviness implies you have to tune your guitar as low as possible. You know, there's plenty of heavy bands that use standard tunings or similar variations to standard tuning, or, you know, relatively high tuned guitars compared to some of the sort of 8-string stuff that we see these days, or 9 strings, or however many strings in metal. This song obviously is in drop C, but I would say this is probably, for me, one of Deftones' heaviest tracks. Just the approach and the feel. You know, heaviness is it's not just the tuning, it's not just the lowness, it's the approach to the song, it's the feeling the song gives you, it's the aggression, it's everything that goes behind the track as well. And this, for me, is like so heavy, but not without having, you know, a sense of melody to it. Like it feels like there's a real purpose to the aggression. So yeah, if you're after heavier Deftones songs, this is definitely one to check out. 56 is Fate Sera, the opening track from White Pony, or at least the original opening track before they added Back to School on the re-release. This is a really, really cool song with the again, like a repeated guitar line, but it's such an interesting guitar line. And Chino's vocals on this, in terms of like vocal dissonance and you know, off-kilter notes and, you know, or non-traditional melodic choices, this is a really, really good example of how he does that. I really love the sort of kind of break at about 1:10, 1:15, where it's pretty much just the guitar and just vocals, and it's just really highlighting the counterplay of Steph and Chino and how they work off of each other, and it's a great way to open the album. 55 is Tempest. This is such a cool track. So this is on Koino Yokan again. I love that synth intro, I love the guitar riff, I love the outro especially, that when it's essentially the same riff but just heavier, and it's so frigging cool. It's a simple track, but the layers and the synths, that riff at the end, like, check it out just for the riff at the end. It's a great track all the way through, but that riff at the end is like the cherry on top. 54 is Elite from White Pony. I believe this either won them or certainly got them nominated for a Grammy, and I can see why. This, again, is one of those really heavy, aggressive tracks that's it pretty much is one riff that's got a slight alteration here and there. I love how the snare in this track sounds. It's almost like the good version of the Metallica St. Anger snare. It's got that really trashy kind of clank to it, but you've got an actual snare sound underneath. And it works really well with Steph doing those big open string full smashes of all 6 strings, and that and the snare happening at the same time sounds massive. 53 is RX Queen. This is such a moody track, and I love the drum intro especially. It's one of those ones where I've never actually been able to like work out like what kind of time signature is it, how is it played, but I love that guitar line, love the drums to it. It sounds huge and wide open. The vocals to this it's got such a creepy element to it, and it's kind of got that veiled version of romance that Chino seems to love to use, where it isn't actually romantic and it's actually talking about something else, and I just love that vibe to it. 52 is Cherry Waves. This is a cool intro with some really great drumming, and that weird bass line as well. Like, I love how that sounds. This kind of feels really spacey, and this is sort of a good summation of the sound of Saturday Night Wrist for me. 51 is LMIRL, which I think stands for Let's Meet IRL. This pick is solely off the back of that intro, that washy guitar with all the chorus and the echo and the delay on it, and the feedback loop sound that there's going on. It just sounds so cool. The rest of the song is pretty inconsequential in terms of where it goes on the list. It's a solid song, but that intro brings it so high up. The atmosphere on it, I wish more of the tracks on Gore had kind of tuned into this, because it's so cool sounding.